morning and welcome to Rising. Thank you for watching. We've got a perfectly adequate show for you today, I do believe, from having looked at the prepared materials. I'm excited to discuss it.
You're the absolute hype man for today's material, obviously, Robert. I'm glad to see we're talking that up to the maximum.
I'm always channeling my old co-host Ryan Grimm.
Yes.
Who had that very dry delivery.
A man of enormous enthusiasm for all things. Well, let's get to something we are enthusiastic about. Robby, what is on your radar?
Well, when is a news story not a news story? Maybe when Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump's nominee for Secretary of Defense, utterly disproves it before it's even published. So here's what happened. Yesterday, Hegseth posted on X that the journalistic organization ProPublica, which he described as a, quote, left-wing hack group, we can debate about that, was planning to publish a bombshell report contradicting Hegseth's account that he had been accepted to West Point in 1999. Hegseth set the record straight by publishing his letter of acceptance, signed by West Point Superintendent Lieutenant General Daniel Christman of the U.S. Army. Combat veteran and conservative pundit Rob Smith celebrated Hegseth for putting down what would have been an entirely fake news cycle generated by, he says, left-wing billionaires. Indeed, ProPublica is funded in part by the charitable foundations of extremely wealthy families like the Fords and also the Carnegies. But ProPublica's editor, Jesse Eisinger, is defending his institution's behavior, noting that, well, they didn't actually publish the article. Quote, "We asked West Point Public Affairs, which told us twice on the record that he hadn't even applied there. We reached out, Hegseth's spokesperson gave us his acceptance letter, and we didn't publish the story. That's journalism." Now, in a tweet thread, Eisinger explained what happened. First, his reporter contacted the West Point Public Affairs office to inquire about Hegseth's claim that he was indeed accepted there. The reporter was told by West Point in no uncertain terms that Hegseth had never even applied there. Eisinger wrote that now we thought we had the makings of a significant story. But the first rule of good journalism is no surprises. You must give the subject of a potential story a fair chance to respond to all of the salient facts. Again, end quote. So they reached out to Hegseth. Hegseth was able to provide, as I mentioned before, a copy of the acceptance letter, which prompted ProPublica to go back to West Point, which issued an apology, writing in a statement, "A review of our records indicates Mr. Peter Hegseth was offered admission to West Point in 1999, but did not attend." They apologized for the error. Eisinger said, at that point, ProPublica killed the story. Quote, "This is how journalism is supposed to work. Hear something, check something, repeat steps 1 and 2 as many times as needed, the end." So look, actually ProPublica deserves credit for checking and double-checking and not publishing something false and defamatory about a conservative Trump supporter and high-profile nominee. Ultimately, they didn't fall for the lie, and they didn't repeat it. Great. But here's my question. Why not publish the story? Now the story isn't that Pete Hegseth lied about getting into West Point. The story is that West Point lied about Pete Hegseth not getting into West Point. If ProPublica published that story, they'd be able to take a real victory lap. We tracked down a malicious rumor about Pete Hegseth, and we found out it wasn't true, despite a prestigious educational institution's efforts to mislead us. Isn't there a story here about West Point getting an easily checked fact wrong? Or is the story only important if it's damaging to Pete Hegseth? A negative story is a story, but not a positive story? Because make no mistake, there's been a major effort to drag Hegseth's name through the mud, relitigating all of his, admittedly messy, past romantic relationships and marriages. The New York Times even brought Hegseth's mother into the picture, you remember that from last week, publishing an email that she sent him years ago objecting to his treatment of the wife he was in the process of divorcing. Are embarrassing, long-ago family disputes relevant to the position of defense secretary? Mom's email aside, much of the damaging reporting on Hegseth's personal behavior has come from anonymous sources. The on-the-record sources who confirmed that Hegseth is a reliable and stand-up person, according to them, that's gotten a lot less attention from the mainstream media. His former colleagues at Fox News and at Concerned Veterans for America are telling a different story. Some of them told the Washington Free Beacon that he's being unfairly smeared, that he was not involved in that boorish behavior attributed to him in earlier anonymous reports. Now, earlier this week, Republican Senator Joni Ernst confirmed she will be supporting Hegseth, largely putting an end to the idea that this nomination is going up in flames, like, for instance, Matt Gaetz. I fully expect Hegseth will indeed be confirmed. So I wanted to do a radar in this because I actually saw a lot of conservative griping about ProPublica in this case, and including from Pete Hegseth. I wanted to point out that, well, they did most of the right thing, at least. They did not actually publish the story. They checked and double-checked and triple-checked, and really the error was on West Point.
Right.
But then I still think that's where the story that West Point almost caused to, fabricate the entire idea that he had lied about getting into West Point, which would have been a big deal.
So first of all, I think ProPublica did its job completely fine. I don't see what the issue really was with them making an inquiry about something they had heard. They had got it, they said, twice confirmed on the record from West Point, and then they went back and forth and it proved to be wrong and they didn't publish it. That's just good journalism and checking something that you have heard to see if it can be verified or not. I think I would differ from you in that I think you are imputing malevolence to West Point as if they were trying to blacken Pete Hegseth's name. My working assumption is that somebody in an office could find no record of him ever applying, said he never applied, and were incorrect about that, and Hegseth was able to prove that they were incorrect. The broader point I would make, though, about the other allegations about Pete Hegseth is, I think as long as one discusses them fairly, which I think we have done here, I think it is, broadly speaking, in the public interest to know these things. So the most serious but unproven allegation against Pete Hegseth is this idea that he sexually assaulted someone in the hotel in California. No charges were pressed, which we have mentioned, I think, every time we have discussed it. He did pay money to his accuser to settle a legal case or legal claim. I think those are relevant things for the public to know about the nominee to lead the Pentagon with its approximately 3 million employees and $800 billion budget, so long as one does not topple over into imputing guilt that cannot actually be proven.
I agree with that. That one, he did pay out a settlement, and it's an accusation of a criminal act, and of course is fair game to discuss and needs to be discussed and is being discussed. That's fine. I think the media outlets that discuss that should, then go into the other stuff, the history with other women, well, then should discuss and are relying on reliable anonymous people saying that he drinks too much or something of that nature. Well, but then there's people on the record who are saying that that's not true. And then we didn't discuss this because you weren't on that week, but I really struggled with the New York Times publishing that email from mom, again, detailing not criminal abuse or violence or sexual assault, but the way he has treated women in romantic relationships, not meeting mom's approval. That, to me, from years ago, gets into very messy family drama that I don't know ought to be litigated in the pages of the New York Times.
Yeah, I mean, I could debate that one either way. I think the pungent and potent phrase the mom used was considering him an abuser of women. And I do think you could make an argument for it on that basis, but I'm not blind to the argument that if we all started putting family emails on the front page of the New York Times, nobody would look very good, right? And it gets all sorts of stuff into the public domain, which maybe is really doesn't have the substance to get there.
Yeah. I think he's getting confirmed. What do you think?
I think so. I mean, and I have changed my mind on that, actually. At one point, his nomination looked very shaky, and it seemed like people like Senator Joni Ernst were leaning against. She has now changed position. The fundamental change that appears to have happened is that Trump, who looked to be wavering at one point, no longer appears to be wavering, seems to be giving him pretty emphatic backing. I think the chances of a significant number of Republican senators voting in outright defiance of Trump seems unlikely unless more serious allegations come out.
Much like the Kavanaugh confirmation stuff, Trump eerily has remained pretty quiet about his nominees through this process, letting it play out, trusting his media surrogates, the MAGA people on TV, on social media, to fight for them without Trump doing it himself, a strategy that worked in the Kavanaugh case. He didn't wade in, blow it up, make it worse. I remember thinking, wow, he does have political tact.
Yeah.
He knows to shh about this one and let it play out, and it will work out in his favor. And I think that same playbook has happened here.
And I think briefly, the fact that Matt Gaetz fell may not actually be all that damaging to the rest of Trump's nominations, because it's one example where someone didn't have the votes to make it, which then,
Yes.
anyway, yes.
Yes, indeed. All right, lots more coming up on our show today. Can't wait to bring it to you. As I said, perfectly adequate. Is that what I said? It's beyond that. That was a joke. You know that. More Rising coming up right after this.